It has been described as a nasty, nasty political and mudslinging election. There were campaign attacks and counterattacks, personal insults, outrageous newspaper accounts of who said what. There were dire predictions of warfare, uprisings, national collapse, and the undoing of the democracy in America. Innovative new forms of politicking capitalized on the growing technology. Does that sound anything like today? Like our national situation today? Well, actually, it was 1800 when President John Adams ran for the second term against his friend and fellow founder, Thomas Jefferson. And yet there were the strategies embodied in the election 224 years ago. The only media at the time was the newspapers aligned with either the Democratic Republican, who was Jefferson, or the Federalist, who was Adams. The papers sought to tear the character of the opponents apart. Fear of losing all religious and moral virtues were spread if Jefferson was the winner. And autocracy and loss of democracy was feared if Adams reigned victorious. Jefferson ultimately won. He became the first non-federalist and the third United States president. It is interesting how history seems to repeat itself, even today. I don't think there is anyone in America today that does not have adverse feelings about our upcoming election. And the truly and sad part is how many of us have lost friends or relatives because of the perspectives that are opposite from ours. How many of you have lost a friend or a relative because of the politics in America? A few of you. And is there anyone who is happy with our current political situation? Please raise your hand. I want to meet with you afterwards. Author David Engelman indicated that we have less empathy for anyone in our out group. And just what is an out group? It is anyone that does not believe as we do. And often we associate the out group with something that is repulsive. Over the last 3 to 4 months, I have reviewed a multitude of books and articles about politics in America. Some of them were Healing the Heart of Democracy by Parker Palmer, The Politics of Jesus by Aubrey Hendricks Jr., and I Never Thought of It That Way by Monica Guzman. Articles by Edward Simon on the hypocrisy in the 2024 American politics and The Problem of Politics by Reverend Lloyd Strom. Today, I want to provide you with a titch of information I gleaned from the studies that provided a few ways that we might shift our reaction to the out group so that we might return to a place of inner peace and calm. Who knows, we might be able to repair some of our relationships. I will not always reference what I'm talking to, who I'm talking about, but the information about with a bibliography is on your handout today if you would like to go ahead and reference those down the road. We'll be if for those of you who are at home, you can contact the office and Crystal will be glad to email a copy of this handout for you because it's got some exercises in it and some prayers in it for you to help begin to feel better during the process of the next month. One of the things that fascinated me was the liberal and conservative perspective. Their respective beliefs have been around, believe it or not, for over 300 years before Jesus existed. Purely out of interest, do you think Jesus was a conservative or a liberal? He was a liberal. And when we think about what he stood for and spoke about, how he supported others, and who he accepted and healed, we know that he was definitely a liberal 2,000 years ago. In one sense, I kind of look sometimes at Jesus as the Bible Robin Hood because he associated with the poor, with those people that were that had challenges. Regardless of what we are, whether we're conservative or liberal in our thinking and in our beliefs, we must still meet others where they are on their journey. We all tend to label people in an attempt to help us understand who they are. We try to fit people in little boxes in our attempt to know them. Oh, that person's over 80. They're too fit and inflexible in their ways and thinking. Or she's a librarian. She must be an introvert. Or women are emotional and men are not. Women cry, men don't. Or boys are better at math. Or how about girls aren't athletic? We tend to stereotype people with labels. And conservatives and liberals are labels that we all use in an attempt to figure out what others believe and why they act the way they do. Unfortunately, stereotypes are not always correct or accurate. They can feed our fears of other people, other cultures, other religions, and their beliefs. And that shuts us down from learning about them and understanding who they are. Stereotypes don't just shape society's structure and relationships, they can deeply influence our own self-perception and our decision-making process. Also, we tend to use terms like us and them, or we and they. Of course, us people are defined as smart. We're likable. We're kind. We're well educated, and we're really with it. Now, on the other hand, the people that are them are defined as stupid, unlikable, mean-spirited, uneducated, and just to name a few of the derogatory labels. We don't like them people and can be pretty awful in the way that we treat them. In an article titled The Science Behind Us versus Them, Dan Shapiro stated, "No longer is content important, the substance of the arguments and the policies. That is important. But at the end of the day, the most important element in terms of being a part of a tribe is loyalty. Loyalty to the tribe. You look at the United States right now, there are these huge political divides. You see the Democratic tribe, you see the Republican tribe as well, and it's very difficult for either side to even say, I understand what you're saying. Because some of the inside of each side are going to say, nope, they're betraying our tribe. And betraying a tribe, that's absolutely taboo. I can suffer social punishment. I'm going to be excommunicated. I'm going to be ridiculed or worse. But that's the challenge of our tribalistic world that we live in right now. We need to feel good about our side so that we might feel good about ourselves. When we perceive that our group is in direct competition with another, especially over a limited resource, we often express hostility towards members of the other group. Part of the us versus them attitude is also believing that we know the right or the correct truth and theirs is incorrect. We mustn't forget, however, that we all belong to a much larger tribe. Regardless of how we define us or them, we, the people, is an all-inclusive phrase. Reverend Lloyd Strom wrote an article regarding the problem of politics. He stated, Intense polarization has fostered exclusively aggressive and vicious behavior within the various political factions. In order to understand that phenomenon, we must consider that politics is just another kind of war. It is a war of ideas fought with words, and and the warriors are called politicians. No matter how we look at it, when we come together with conflicting ideas, the war is on. A political war requires us to take sides, regardless of the issues or the candidate. Being human, we tend to pick the side that we like. And as Lloyd puts it, however, if we make our judgment on the basis of appearance or rely solely upon our feelings, we will almost always make the wrong decision. As Buddha puts it, those who live according to their likes and dislikes live in bondage. We must always make our decisions based upon wisdom and understanding. When we must see things as they truly are, without our filters of beliefs and ideas that are often based on a lack of knowledge and understanding because of our likes and our dislikes. Parker Palmer writes about the 5 habits of the heart. And he stated, if I were asked for 2 words to summarize the habits of the heart American citizens need in response to the 21st century conditions, chutzpah and humility are the 2 words I would choose. By chutzpah, I mean knowing that I have a voice that needs to be heard and the right to speak it. By humility, I mean accepting the facts that my truth is always partial and may not be true at all. So I need to listen with openness and respect, especially to others. The 5 habits of the heart that he believes are crucial to sustaining our democracy are as follows. First, we must understand that we are all in this together. Like it or not, we are dependent upon each other. Just look at the longshoreman thing that we went through and what would have been lost on those crates. And it would have been food, for example, that would not have been given to us. How we are dependent upon the ships and the longshoremen and the truck drivers that deliver it. And then it's sold to us in the grocery store. We are so dependent upon each other. Additionally, we are accountable to each other, including the strangers and the thems. We are interconnected. Second, we must develop an appreciation of the values of otherness. Think of the world in terms of us and them limits our mind and our personal growth. We need to think of the stranger in terms of the old-fashioned hospitality that used to occur. When strangers would arrive at their door and knock and seeking refuge and food for the night, they were welcomed in because people believed that they could learn something from them. As Palmer puts it, we will not practice deep hospitality if we do not embrace the creative possibilities inherent in our differences. Third, we must cultivate the ability to hold tension in life-giving ways. Our lives are filled with contradiction. There's the gap between behavior and aspirations. There are the beliefs of them that are the opposite of what we believe to be true. We must allow these contradictions to expand our heart and open us to a new understanding of ourselves and others. By doing that, we create new insight, energy, and possibly a new perspective. Next, we have to generate a sense of a personal voice and agency. Remember, we are the actors in this drama. It is us that creates and contributes to positive change. Our task is to act and speak and express our version of the truth. However, it's also our task before sharing it to validate and make sure our truth is indeed factual. Not too long ago, I was having a conversation with my 23-year-old great nephew, and we were talking about the environment, and he indicated that, Eileen, electric cars are really damaging the environment. I looked at him. We were on FaceTime, and I was kind of surprised. And my curiosity poked me, and I asked, "So how? Tell me how electric cars are harming." He said, "Well, all electric charging stations are run by diesel fuel, and they're damaging our air quality." I said, "Where did you get that?" And he goes, "Oh, I read it somewhere." I cautioned him to never ever tell something like that unless he knew the source and could relate the source and to check for accuracy. Finally, we must strengthen our capacity to create community. It took a village to raise a Rosa Parks. Without a community, it is nearly impossible to exercise the power of one in a way that multiplies. It was Rosa Parks' courageous act that ignited the Montgomery bus boycott that forced social change. Each of us belongs to a multitude of communities. There's the center, our families, our work environment and communities. Chico, just to name a few of our communities. What community are you willing to work with in order to ensure positive social change? Terry Tempest Williams stated in a book, Engagement, "The human heart is the first home of democracy. It is where we embrace our questions. Can we be equitable? Can we be generous? Can we listen with our whole being, not just our mind, and offer our attention rather than our opinions? And do we have enough resolve in our hearts to act courageously, relentlessly, without giving up, ever, trusting our fellow citizens to join with us in our determined pursuit of a living democracy?" Note key phrases and key words: equitable, generous, listen, attention, resolve. All of those require action by each and every one of us. And this is our task in the weeks and the months to come. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I'm saying it's time for us to try. In Monica Guzman's book, I Never Thought of It That Way, she shares how all political sides treat and talk to each other is broken. She cites research regarding our polarization and ways we can come back together to understand each other. Research from numerous institutions have studied our political divides and divisions and discovered that there are three kinds of polarization. First is ideological polarization due to policy disagreements which are based on reasons. Second is the affective polarization, which is due to growing animosity between people in either party. And finally is false polarization, which is overestimating the ideological divisions between the sides that are based on lies. We can choose to remain polarized, or we can reach out and take one step closer to someone who disagrees with us. We can do that in a multitude of ways. Try reading an opinion from a credible source that has an opposite opinion. Reach out and ask someone to share conversation and coffee to explore your differences. Or when you want to explore why you think they are wrong, take the time to explore what is missing. Instead of trying to determine whose view is right, determine what makes each view understandable. When you want to discover why someone believes something that absolutely stumps you, discover how they came to believe it. Instead of trying to know what their problem is, ask about their concerns. Don't demand why they don't care about what you care about. Rather, learn what they care about more. When you think you've heard enough, then you find yourself ready to interrupt and react with judgment. Think about the gap of what you know and don't know, and then ask one more curious question. Remember the words equitable, generous, listen, attention, resolve. According to our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we are all treated fairly and equally. We still have a ways to go in some areas, but we're getting there as long as we stand up for each other regardless of what we believe politically. Be generous with your time. Be willing to listen. Pay attention to another's story so that you can understand their perspective and their challenges in life. And finally, resolve to not let your differences get in the way of your relationships. Show respect for the other person. My dad lived 100 years. In his lifetime, he voted for 200 presidential elections. And that was when you had to be 21 to vote. Never once did he deviate from his conservative farming roots. Dad and I both shared a complete love of politics. That, of course, was until I left my conservative upbringing. He was a lumberman. I was an environmentalist. He was an entrepreneur. I was a government employee that he called a boll weevil. He believed life, and I believed that a woman had the right to choose. For many years, our family would gather at a cabin in Butte Meadows for an annual vacation. And Dad and I, at some point in time, would always have a major discussion around the dinner table, and voices would get higher and higher. Maybe I should just call it an argument. And of course, nothing got resolved. We finally agreed one year that we would disagree and to never, ever talk politics again. I'd walk into his room at the courtyard where he lived for 13 years in assisted living, and he would immediately turn off Fox News. He knew what I would say. Dad never quite understood how he had raised two kids that became liberal. From 1987 to 1993, Dad lost his brother, his son, and his nephew to AIDS. It hit him hard. The Human Rights Campaign, a lobbying organization that supports LGBTQ issues, AIDS issues, women's rights, and candidates that support equal rights for all, would put out an annual report card every year for all senators and representatives on how they had voted on these issues. And at the time, our House of Representatives had one of the worst 5 voting records on Congress on all of those issues. I took the report card over to Dad and I handed it to him and I said, I'm not here to discuss this. I'm not here to argue with you. I just want you to see the report card. And I just want you to understand why I cannot support the candidates that you do. A few days later, my dad called me and said, I have something for you to hear. He had written a letter to the congressman indicating he could no longer support his run for Congress because of his voting record on those issues. He concluded his letter stating that until all Americans have the same rights, none of us are truly free. Needless to say, I was particularly proud of my dad that day. We can all come together in oneness and unity if we're willing to speak from a place of love and kindness, to release our judgment and be still and open to another. Ernest Holmes said, "We are therefore members of the universe, and being members of that unites everything. We are some part of each other. Indeed, we are all one. We are part with each other, whether you're liberal or conservative." Let's remember that. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours, and so it is. Amen. Hannah?